thank you so much for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us today, Ms. Kozlowski. I'm Shelley Schuler, and I am watching the questions as they come in, and we have about a half a dozen for you right now if you've got time.
I
And
do.
the first one is, thank you. Can you talk a little bit more about geriatric coordinators and where somebody might find one of those?
Oh, excellent question. A geriatric care manager is usually, you can find them with your N4A, which is your Area Agency on Aging. If you look up N4, the number 4A, just those three things, n4a.org, you will pull up the National Association for Area Agencies on Aging, and they should be able to give you a place and a reference to where you could find a geriatric care manager. They're usually associated with many of the different senior centers. If you have one near you, I would recommend that. You can also find them through the Elder Care Locator, looking up in your particular community where there might be a geriatric care manager to contact. They have a wide range of knowledge. They know everything about the good and the not as good assisted living or memory care units. They know how to help you move a parent from one place to another, how to provide transportation for medical appointments. They'll have information about the local geriatricians and even maybe some specialists in the field. They're great because they have good references on elder care lawyers who might be helpful to you in putting together some of the things we talked about today.
Great, thank you. Another question for you. As part of your own planning, what truly is the value of long-term care insurance? Is it really worthwhile? We have a couple people who would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh boy, that's a complicated question. Well, I have a couple of thoughts. One, I know people who are absolutely adamant you absolutely must have it because they have seen their families ruined financially by the cost of care in later life. And I have looked at, it's really, it's going to be, it's like any other insurance. It's a risk thing, right? So you have to understand a little bit about who you are. If you have longevity in your family and you think you're going to, like I plan for 100, that's what I do. I mean, if I live to 100, hallelujah. If I live longer, well, we'll see how that goes. And if I don't make it, that's okay too. But given both of the longevity of my parents, and my mother had several sisters who lived into their late 90s, I think it's important for me to plan that far ahead. The cost, it can be very high. And that's the thing you have to balance. And I feel incredibly lucky that my parents did not have any chronic conditions in later life because they were both reasonably healthy until, for my mother, until maybe, I don't know, less than a month before she passed away. And my dad just died in his sleep very soon after Election Day last year and was very eager to wake up in the next morning to find out where the election stood. So you have to look at your own sort of genetic makeup and to see how you think how long you're going to live. I think you have to balance your own income versus what the premiums would be over any period of time. But I think we all have to count on the fact that we are going to have medical expenses in the last 2 or 3 years of life, and if we're prepared to face those. I think people are either adamantly totally for it or totally not for it. For a variety of circumstances, I don't have it at the moment, but I am seriously considering getting it. That's all I can say. So
Thank you.
I know that's not much of an answer, but I think you have to look at two things: your finances and your health projections.
Yes, long-term care is a tricky nut to crack. Here's another question for you. Are there any tax deductions that caregivers can take, for example, mileage to and from medical appointments for care recipients?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And what I did, I took those were part of the medical costs and deductions I took on my father's tax forms for the last 3 or 4 years, because I took him to probably 98% of his doctor's appointments. So I didn't figure mileage as much, but the parking, because I live in Washington, D.C., the parking can kill you. So I just kept all of the receipts for parking. I paid them all. I got a separate credit card that my father had. I was a joint holder on that credit card, but I only used that credit card for his expenses. So it was really easy at tax time to see that I'd spent, I don't know, $68 in parking. That's a legitimate medical expense. And I could have calculated the mileage as well, but that is a very legitimate expense that can be then counted.
Gotcha. Thank you. How about, can you repeat the savings sheet you talked about people downloading from wiserwomen.org? And I know that we're going to make your presentation available and the slides later on, but if you could repeat that for people, there's great interest in it.
It's called a Savers Credit. It's on Wiser, and it's got a great infographic about that. But it really it was really aimed at moderate income, or wage earners or family earners, and it's another piece of your retirement.
Great. I have another question for you. We have someone who wonders about using short-term care or who is providing short-term care, such as one time a week to give her dad a break. It's expected to last about 6 months. She's currently using FMLA and vacation time for this care. Should she think about getting compensated from her parents for this care?
It depends again on their financial situation. But if there is a way that she could, there was some agreement, some family agreement or agreement with their parents that they pay her some moderate amount of money, whatever that is, you can figure out what that is based on where you live and what the cost is actually. I mean, then I think it's a perfectly legitimate expense, and it's an expense that they can deduct as their caregiving expense from their taxes. She would have to count it as income, but there's that piece. It just depends how you would work. But there's no reason why, if they have the resources available to give her compensation for that day, there's no reason why that can't be done.
Thank you. And I have someone who is passing along her thanks as well, and noted that caregivers need to get passwords. Plus, there are many of us who are in the sandwich generation having to pay for both kids in college and parents. But I think passwords is the comment that she'd like to hear you talk about a little bit.
Oh, 100%. That goes right to the same idea of setting up, powers of attorney or of any kind, be it medical or financial. You've got to have a picture, because I can tell you more often than not, there are especially older people who are now paranoid and afraid somebody's going to break into their computers, because that's all they hear about on the news is that somebody somewhere knows those passwords. And if they keep changing them, what they're changing them to. And if they have a group of them, what is the group of them, so that they can get that changed. Otherwise, if all of this information is kept electronically and cannot be accessed through any means whatsoever, then the family is going to have to incur the cost of a computer expert to download all of the information that's there. And they can crack the passwords and they can get in. But the cost of the family is going to be a few $1,000s that doesn't need to be spent on something like that. So I would highly recommend somebody. Sometimes for older adults, there's an actual book you can get that will, where you can record all of your passwords or whatever else, however you want to do it. But somebody needs to know somewhere what they are. I don't advise, sending them electronically, but if some family member can sit down and help write those out for each of the accounts and then begin to minimize the number of accounts. Oh my Lord, my mom had 12 bank accounts. Who knew? And by the time before she died, I was able to consolidate all of them just to 2. So that's another thing that's really important to do.
You're right. Keeping all those important papers and passwords together is just key.
Is key.
Another question?
Just shrinking the universe. Make fewer of them as you can over time. Just keep making fewer. No credit card, all of that stuff. One credit card, no department store credit cards, all of that stuff.
Great. Can you talk more about state laws that require adult children to pay for aging parent care? That was a request that came in the questions.
I know it's a little bit oddball thing. Actually, the country of China has the same thing. It's called the parent abandonment law. It's kind of like this. It's just they're kind of vague in the way they're written, but they're saying that offspring need to be able to attend to the financial and other care needs of parents, and they can't disown the responsibility associated with them. I'd have to read some of them. I read them a long time ago because you're not going to find, the sheriff riding on his horse trying to, arrest you for walking away from your parents. But I think there are circumstances in some cases where you may have a parent or parents who are now destitute, and you have a highly successful offspring who's not contributing at all to their welfare. And I think the states can make a claim that you would need to pay for their long-term care in either a nursing home or assisted living or some other circumstance if that's what would need to be done. So there are ways that can be enforced both in a civil context and in a criminal context. I hope that helps. I don't have the specifics, and I don't know if Wisconsin has one.
Thank you. Here's one for you. So let's say you have all your paperwork in place as you age, your POA, your living will, etc. With no kids and a deceased spouse, who would you recommend to contact to help with your finances, to get a personal POA, the healthcare POA, etc.?
Again, depends. If there's an elder care lawyer, is a good idea because that person would have contacts both in the financial and in medical areas, I would think. You could, if you have a close friend, you could leave that information with them. But to prepare the documents, I would go to, you can get most of them online, but I would also just make one appointment at a lawyer. I would send an email if you're on a computer and just say, I need these 3 documents, a medical, a financial, and a will, and that's it. And they can all be done very efficiently and very cleanly. And especially if there are no surviving children, and you don't have any nieces, nephews, or any other assorted relatives or family to whom you want to leave anything. You just need to be prepared for what the lawyers call the Armageddon provision, which means there's nobody around. Where does the money go next? And that's sometimes a hard thing to think about. For some people, it's not so hard at all. Many colleges and universities across the United States have received a lot of money in those provisions.
Got it. Thank you. Here's another one for you. My husband is 9 years older than me. How do I protect my/our savings so I have funding if I live years beyond him? It seems like a likely scenario given our genes and the family history on his side.
Okay, good question. I would say right now, segregate things that you can so that you have your own stuff, and so that you can use that, and should he, predecease you, I think you might plan on him predeceasing you. I think you should also think about what does your retirement look like. If you don't have an IRA in your name alone and he's working and you're not, make sure that he opens an IRA for you and funds it to the tune of $7,000 a year to make sure that you have some retirement income that's in that kind of a vehicle. I would make sure that you have at least a separate bank account somewhere so that, should he have care and a joint bank account evaporate because of his care, that yours does not. So I would say, just segregate a few key things, some key investment vehicles, some key banking vehicles, and, certainly have your own documents because they're going to be different than his. But having those things separate, make sure that you have a car that's in your name. Make sure that you have certain things that are just in your name should there be a moment when you find yourself alone.
Thank you. And this one is along the same lines. My mother doesn't have a large amount of assets other than her home, a life insurance policy, and a couple of savings accounts. She has beneficiaries set for all of them and a transfer of deed upon death. Is that sufficient, or should she get a will drawn up or something else, and why?
Oh, she should definitely get a will drawn up that says exactly that. It can be one page and say that she's of sound mind and she has these assets and she has distributed these assets in the way that she feels comfortable. And if she wants to articulate who the beneficiaries are of each of those things, that she can do that, and the transfer on death of the house and all of that. Because otherwise, everything will flow to the relatives, to the family, by the laws of intestacy. And what the law says about intestate distribution might be different than what she wants. So I think it's important to make sure that's clearly articulated. The other thing about a will that's important is, and again, I haven't done this piece and need to, if you have a specific bequest, if there's stuff that you specifically want to give to somebody, Aunt Martha's old, bracelet from the 1800s, whatever it is, and you want to make sure that goes to a particular person in your family, you've got to articulate that. Leaving that to somebody else to decide is not going to be necessarily execute the wishes that you have. So really important, even if it's just a list. And if people want to change it later because you gave so-and-so the candlesticks and somebody wanted the mug, I don't know, whatever it is, you can certainly leave room for moving that around. But if there are specific bequests, even if they are not, monetary assets, but sentimental assets, you make sure that those are clearly set forth, either best in writing than not. I can tell you one quick story. My mother's twin sister, my aunt, had 3 children, and before she died, she promised everything to every one of them. They all lived in different states. They would come to visit, and she goes, "Oh, the desk is yours. Oh, the desk is yours. Oh, the desk is yours." She never wrote it down. Each one of those children thought that they were going to get the desk, and it has caused a family rupture that is not yet healed 20 years later. Don't do that.
Oh, goodness.
She was feeling generous.
Another question?
No. But anyway, go ahead.
Do you have suggestions for dealing with a caregiving spouse who continually claims ignorance and inability and just shuffles duties off to others? How do you get somebody to pull their weight when you're doing caregiving duties together?
Oh, good luck. Well, maybe the best thing to do is to be observant and figure out exactly what that person can do best and have that repeated over and over again. Or if that doesn't work, you can say, if you don't want to do that, then we can pay someone to do this instead, and that will have an impact on him. It'll also have an impact on her. But I think there's ways of just trying to figure out, and maybe just talking about, what is it that you like to do? What is it that, what do you, finding some place of something that you can not have to worry about X being done. I think that would be the best thing that I could think of. Or alternating different times and days, or just bring in a third party every now and then, not all the time, but maybe just on a couple days a week for a few hours, something like that. Maybe what this person needs is respite and nothing else. I don't know.
That's still a good answer. It's a hard thing to figure out.
Yeah, without knowing the specific stuff, it's hard to figure it out.
Right. And one last question for you. You're now living alone, spouse deceased, no kids. If I get dementia, who would you recommend help for me? Where can I set that up so that I know somebody's going to help as we need it?
Okay. So the most important thing would be to have regular doctor visits to make sure that you are seeing your internist, if that's the person you see, regularly. And tell that person, look, if you're seeing any cognitive changes in me, then what would the plan be? Who would you contact? Again, a geriatric care manager is, again, the best person to be seeing you every 6 months, let's say, after a certain age, just to check in and see how it's going. Because dementias, there's 28 different kinds or 38 different kinds of dementia. Not everybody gets Alzheimer's, but there's different things that happen. So someone who hasn't seen you for a few months is going to notice changes. They're going to notice cognitive changes in the way you are taking care of yourself, your grooming. They'll notice things about the way you walk. They'll notice things about the way you are answering questions. There could be questions, and it's going to be very subtle at first because people don't get dementia overnight. It's a longer process. And there are also things that the natural aging brain does that are perfectly consistent with getting older. And one of them, unfortunately, is the fact that people become less risk averse. So that's why you see older people, and just like younger people, engaging in lotteries of all kinds, games of chance, all of that, because that's part of what happens to the natural aging brain. But if you're worried about getting dementia in some way that makes it incapacitated for you, I would talk to your doctor I would line up with a doctor, a geriatrician, or a neurologist who you would be able to see, so you know who these people are. And again, depending on your age, you could start to see those people once a year, and they would be able to see if there were differences and know what to do. I think that's really important. I think if you have an investment account with a brokerage firm, no matter how small, there is a form you can fill out called a trusted person form. That gives somebody who's not a power of attorney, could be one of your good friends who doesn't have a financial interest, but they have no transactional ability to do anything in your account, but they are the person that your broker can call. If you call the broker and say, forget it, sell all of my blue chip stock and buy that new penny stock that has individual spaceships. That's what I want to do. And your broker's going like, I don't think so. So they can call that trusted party and say, what's going on with Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so. Okay?
Great. I have one last question that came in, and that it relates to Medicare and Medicaid and who qualifies for what, and if someone is on one today, would they be able to use the other one later?
Yes, they can, and you become something called dual eligibles. So if you go to your Medicare.gov, look up dual eligible, and that will tell you the different circumstances in which you can be receiving benefits from both Medicare and Medicaid.
Thank you so much. Those are all our questions that came in today. I want to say thank you again to Ms. Kozlowski for sharing her information knowledge with us, and to remind folks that ETF will have a recording of this out for you in 7 to 10 days, along with a link to the resources, the PowerPoint that she shared that has all those wonderful Wiser links for us. So watch for that to come out in 2 weeks or so. And this wraps up the presentation for today. Thanks so much for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate it. Thanks.